let's look at the action on, what day is it? Thursday. Thursday in the NBA. There were 5 games on. Let's recap it all. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I invented the question mark. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on Instagram TikTok redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. Be a double banger. Come and watch the video, listen to the audio. And if you are over on the YouTube side, go and check out the live trade deadline show. The landing page is up after I screwed up the first one. I want 500 likes on that. It's Thursday, February 8th, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Let's pre-like it. Let's pre-bang it. Let's pre-push it into the algorithm. So you can even leave comments on the video right now if you want, as we get ready for the trade deadline about 3 weeks from now. We're going to talk about the action across the NBA on Thursday. We got a little bit of data from some of the teams, or the 2 teams that were involved in the Pascal Siakam deal. We don't get everything because Pascal Siakam didn't play, but we've got some interesting stuff there in Toronto that we are going to talk about. Let's just get straight into some news, though. We got something from Shams Charania regarding Christian Koloko. We knew there'd been something that was keeping him out all season. It was very mysterious. It does make sense now what Shams said after the waiving of Koloko in that deal. Shams said he's dealing with a blood clot, which is obviously really serious, and he might not be able to resume his career. He was showing some really promising signs last season as a rim protector, as an early second-round pick, and that would it'd be tragic if he wasn't able to resume his career. We've seen a couple of NBA players over the last 6-7 years who've dealt with some blood clot issues. One of them was Chris Bosh, and unfortunately that did end his career. He was a little bit older. The other one was Brandon Ingram, who suffered some blood clot issues, but he's obviously been able to resume his career. The Koloko one is a bit, I think Ingram's one was in his arm. Koloko's one, I believe, is in his chest, and that's causing some of these breathing difficulties. So we hope that everything's okay, not only for his career, but also for his life, honestly, because that's obviously pretty scary stuff. Speaking of scary stuff, the passing away of the Warriors assistant coach has led to another game post moment. Warriors, Mavs. People have asked a couple of questions here. What do you do for fantasy? Like nothing. You don't do anything. You can't do anything. That stuff happens, unfortunately. The weird stuff, snowed games, postponements due to this. You don't do anything in your league. You don't. Had someone ask, what do I do? Do I give someone that's got Warriors or Mavs and Jazz players? Do I give them extra waiver moves? No, you don't do any of those things. It's just unfortunate. If you've got a lot of Warriors guys in your team, it's gonna hurt you for fantasy. Obviously, that is secondary to the tragedy. But I do understand that you as a fantasy manager has actually nothing to do with that. Like you can have empathy, but it doesn't actually impact you on that personal level. But you don't do anything from a fantasy point of view. You don't adjust anything for this week or anything like that. Nothing happens. Now, when these games are going to be rescheduled, I have no idea. It'll be at some point later in the year. The Warriors have obviously got 2 to make up now, the Jazz 1 and the Mavericks 1. But they could be really at any point. So I don't think it's worth making moves based on that in a fantasy setting. I put this here, and I normally wouldn't mention this sort of thing, but Jet Howard, right? Jet Howard, who has done nothing at the NBA level. He struggled in some of his G League games. But the last couple of G League games, he's been on fire. The Magic are without Franz Wagner. They're without Gary Harris. And they limited Caleb Houston's minutes last game. And again, I wouldn't bring this up, but multiple Magic beat reporters, bloggers, anyway, a lot of people around Magic media have made a big point to tell us that Jet Howard has been called up from Lakeland. And a few eye emoji tweets, a few this is interesting, keep an eye on this. And I don't know what it means. I don't know that it means anything. It probably means absolutely nothing. But what I'm out here suggesting is that with Harris out, with Houston sort of struggling, does Jet get into the rotation tomorrow? I wouldn't rule that out. Is it going to matter for fantasy? Almost definitely not. But that's important for those of you in dynasty leagues, or those of you who are like Michigan fans who just want to see the bloke play. it just caught my eye that multiple Magic reporters were like, like they were doing a bit of like, just watch out, watch it. And I don't know what it means. It might mean nothing. But it was enough for me to go, all right, let's talk about it. The other bad news for a rookie is Dariq Whitehead is dealing with the stress reactions in his leg. We know he missed plenty of time in college with 2 foot problems. He's barely played this season. Now he's got a stress reaction again. That's terrible. Like, that's not... I really like Dariq Whitehead as a prospect. Good size, wing, can shoot, can pass. But 2 foot surgery type scenarios now, plus this is a huge, huge setback to begin his career. And I just hope that he's able to be good and get healthy and play. Players have done it. Brook Lopez, Karis LeVert, 2 members of the Nets who had multiple foot and bone issues in their bottom half, I was going to say, in their lower body, and they've been fine. So it's just a shit start to a career, unfortunately, for Dariq Whitehead, the pimple. Let's look at some waiver wire trends over the last 48 hours. Not 48 hours, 24 hours. They are the numbers that I'm talking about. So who's the most added player? The cockroach is at number 1, Mason Plumlee. Fine to add him. I don't think he's guaranteed 28 a night. He might play more. Or they might go to Tice Westbrook combinations. One thing I do know is that Mason Plumlee is not blocking 3 shots a game. He's okay to roster without any question about it, for the short term at least. And that short term with Zubats being out, it literally might be 6 weeks. But Plumlee is fine to add. Marvin Bagley, congratulations if you streamed Marvin Bagley in. I talked about it on the waiver wire show and said I added him and I couldn't believe it. I did not expect what we got from Bagley. We'll talk about it later. And your question is going to be, is he an ad long term? I don't think so. But I also don't know how long Daniel Gafford's going to be out. He got a concussion on Monday. They've got a back-to-back Saturday, Sunday. And starting Saturday, they've got 4 games in 6 nights, the Wizards. So I don't dislike an ad of Bagley, but we'll talk about that more later. Wendell Carter up 11%. Last 2 games, he's hitting his shots at a really high level. They've taken Mo Wagner out of the rotation, so it's all Goga and all Wendell. Again, this is a guy with a track record of top 100 finishes the last 2 seasons, who's had some struggles this season, but maybe. Gary Trent up 10%. What I talked about yesterday with Trent was actually bang spot on. And I'm not always going to do that. But I said to you, look at Gary Trent's line here. If the shots don't go in at 88%, he's a nothing. And guess what they didn't do today? Go in at 88%. I don't believe that Trent's a must-roster player. Greg Jackson the second, GG Jackson up 8%. People have grabbed him. That Memphis game has just started as I'm recording this part of the show. We'll talk about him when we get to the Memphis game later on. And then Jaden McDaniels up 8%. His last 2 games have been really strong. Not sure that he needs to hold as a must-roster guy, but some interesting numbers from him. Recently, the most dropped players, Trace Jackson-Davis, while with the Warriors postponements, very easy to make that call. Same with Brandon Pajemski down 6% and Mo Wagner down 7%, who's not even playing. They are just very, very easy drops. Matisse Thybulle down 5%. Not really sure why so many people even had him to be dropped that far. He's not on the injury report with this ankle injury. He's just not going to play enough to matter for most leagues. Cam Whitmore down 5. I had picked him up to see what was going to happen. I've moved on now, and I think that's totally a reason. We played 9 minutes last game. That's not to suggest you'll play 9 minutes every game. But if you're a bench player who's getting some minutes because someone is out and you've still got the capability to play under 10 minutes, that's not someone I want to hold on to. And Kelly Oubre down 5% as well, just not providing anything. And if you wanted to drop him to get one of these Grizzlies guys or try a Bagley or try a Plumlee, totally reasonable. I don't think the upside for Oubre is all that high, unfortunately, for Kelly Oubre. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with me, Josh Lloyd, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball to help bring you some of the best fantasy picks every week. Scouting the waiver wire is important to helping to build a championship team, and I'm going to go through some guys who I think can be a guaranteed fit on your roster. Now, I wrote this list the other day, and one of the names I put on there is Marvin Bagley, because Marvin Bagley is going to start if Dan Gafford remains silent. They have no other centers. And he did things that Marvin Bagley has never done ever before in today's game. I don't think that it's going to last long term, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. And the fact that they lent so heavily into Bagley is very, very interesting. And I am not, if you've joined this show for the first time, you might think that I'm out here loving Marvin Bagley. Couldn't be further from the truth. But the role here looks interesting, at least in the very, very, very short term. And that is something that can work in fantasy. So is that going to be something that wins you a championship? Might win you a week matchup, and that might be enough. Is he a perfect fit? Well, he might be this week as well. Getting things as a perfect fit is what eBay Motors is all about. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED, headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever it is that your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. So keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to US customers. Eligible items only and exclusions apply. So that's the waiver wire part done. Let's do games. First one. This is the Marvin Bagley show. Maybe I should chuck him as the thumbnail on today's image because it's worth talking about. He put up some very, very strong numbers. So Bagley arrived via the trade here to the Wizards. Daniel Gafford was out in the concussion protocol. And earlier in the season when Gafford was out, they just would start Kyle Kuzma at center. And then they'd have Muscala and Gallinari coming off the bench. And they'd put Bilal Coulibaly into the starting lineup. Not today. They played Marvin Bagley as a starting center. And what is crazy about Bagley, is that not only, Gafford's been playing all season with no backup, and he gets 31, 32 minutes, 28 minutes, 27. Bagley played 39 minutes. Seems a lot, yeah? 20 and 11 with 2 assists, 2 steals and 3 blocks. That's the crazy part. He shot 63 from the field. The other crazy part is he missed all 5 of his free throws. The thing that I would have said, yes, look, it's a very clear situation where he's in here and he is replacing Dan Gafford. But the fact that Wes Unseld, one of the worst coaches in the NBA, saw Bagley and thought, yeah, we have to give him all of these minutes because I love this scoring ability that Bagley's got, makes me a little concerned because there's been plenty of times when there's no other centers. 40 games on this roster without any other centers, really, and Gafford doesn't play 39 minutes every game. So I'm a little worried that he might say, we just need Bagley out there to score. I don't, if I've got Gafford, I'm not doing anything stupid. I'm not dropping him, not doing anything like that. And I'm not adding Bagley thinking this is going to hold. I'm not. But that part just gives me a slight amount of pause. The other thing with Bagley is these 2 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks. It's just not going to hold like that. He just doesn't do it. Points, rebounds, absolutely. Bad free throws, 100%. Good field goals, usually he's pretty good at it. He can help in all of those areas, and if he played 30 minutes a night, he would actually be a definite points league guy and probably a 12-team category guy for certain teams. I'm not sure we're going to get that. We might get to 21. We might get a 24-minute split. I don't think so, but we might. But I've got no problem adding him with this really condensed schedule coming up for the Wizards. A Saturday, Sunday back-to-back as well. Go for it. No problem. Didn't expect this at all, but here we go. Tyus Jones scored 2 points, but was it bad? Not really. He played 37 minutes, which is a lot. Again, also, remember, this is the coach that just plays guys 26 minutes some nights. And everyone just got pumped full of minutes today. 37 for Jones, 37 minutes, 2 points, 4 rebounds. But he had 15 assists and 3 steals and shot 17%. One of the biggest up and down games you'll see. While Kuzma had 15, 6, and 5 with 2 steals and a block. And Jordy Poole was pretty good. 24, 4 and 2, 34 minutes. Shot 37%, sorry. But he was 8 of 8 from the line. It's getting better for Poole. He's top 100 over the last 5 games, 31 minutes. He's inside the top 140 for the season. It's still shithouse, but it's not like he's the 300th best player or anything like that. Denny Avdias is all right, 15 and 8. Probably still should be on a 12-team roster. While that's about it. Oh, Coulibaly, 5, 2, and 2. I don't think you need to be holding on to Bilal. For the Knicks, there was no Mitch Robinson, obviously, and no Josh the Hitman Hart. Tom Thibodeau's rotations are infuriating at times. OG Anunoby played 43 minutes. And you'll say, he's used to Nick Nurse. This is not Nick Nurse. This is very different to Nick Nurse. This man's played 42 minutes a night over the week. 19 and 7 with 3 threes is really good. 2 blocks is really strong. He's much better than he was in Toronto. But these minutes are legitimately insane. Jalen Brunson played 40 minutes on a back-to-back. 41, 8 and 8, 2 steals, a block, 52% shooting on 85 from the line. But the way that everything gets distributed offensively is pretty crazy. No one else really gets to do anything apart from Brunson and Randall. And even Randall didn't do much today. Hartenstein had his customary 6 points in 39 minutes, but 17 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, a block, 60%. Just bang the same stuff. And with Hart out, we got big minutes for DiVincenzo. 38 of them. 19, 3 and 3 with 5 triples. Thibodeau has a group of guys that he trusts, and that is it. And if someone gets injured in that spot, it appears that they just give the minutes to the other guys in there. So Dante will move back to 25 minutes most likely next game and be a borderline-ish 12-team guy. I think you should still hold him, but borderline. I would have loved for him to give Quentin Grimes minutes, but I think he has ruined Quentin Grimes, to be honest. Grimes is clearly unhappy with the role. Thibodeau's clearly unhappy with Grimes. He played 19 minutes in a game without Josh Hart and had 0 points. Missed all 5 of his shots. He's playing horribly. There's no doubt about it, but I'm certain this is a locker room personality, confidence thing with Grimes. The other thing is Juice McBride was playing 33 minutes a night, but even with a guy like Josh Hart out, Thibodeau couldn't find any way to play McBride and Brunson together. He played 8 minutes for 5 points. Couldn't play them together at all. It's impossible to do that. Had to play 40 minutes. Well, I suppose when you're struggling to beat the Wizards, you got to pull out all the stops. Julius Randle had 21, 8, and 5 on 47% shooting in 39 minutes. And that's just like the starters, man. The lowest minutes for the starters was 38 to DiVincenzo against the Wizards. So what are we doing with this? I'm just monitoring Grimes in case there's a trade. Achua played 9 minutes because he is terrible. There's some funny clips going around of Preston Achua's highlights on the Knicks. Yeah, they're pretty humorous. He's so bad. And Hartenstein's obviously rosterable. There's 5 guys here, and Dante's the back end one of them, and that's really about it. The Thibodeau thing is great if you get into the right position for him, and it's just dreadful for everybody else. And I'm not really sure there's much of a debate about it. Maybe not. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's also the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of going up against thousands of different people, trying to put together lineups with salary caps and worrying about who's going to fit in and how people are going to take your money, it's just player projections. PrizePicks puts them up for so many different players, so many different stat types. You look at him and you say, oh, I just think he's going to do more than that. Surely you're going too low here, PrizePicks, but let's go more. And you put between 2 to 6 of those together. Doesn't always have to be more. You can do less. Put them together, and if you get the 6 right, you can win 25 times your money back. $10 in, $250 out. Plus, the injury insurance policy. If someone gets hurt in the first half and does not return in the second half, well, that player gets rebooted. You don't lose out. It just gets rebooted. Very easy to do. It's fun. It's easy. It's exciting. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That is PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. The code is LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. So let's bring us now into the second game of the night. And as I said, we got a little bit of a look at one of the teams involved in the Pascal Siakam trade. It was the team that traded away Pascal Siakam, the Toronto Raptors. They lose to the Bulls 116-110 was the final score. Vooch. Actually, let's start with the skater boy, Zach LaVine, because he played 24 minutes and had 8 points on 43% shooting. Really good stuff from LaVine. He sprained his ankle early on, and he didn't, he came back, and then he sort of pulled out Giggity at the beginning of the fourth quarter and never returned. He was pretty gimpy moving around. They play again on Saturday. I don't think that he is going to play. And what that does is we saw a big bump in minutes for Ayo Dosunmu, not a sizable bump for Pat Williams, but I think that's what will end up happening if LaVine misses, because we already got a pretty good sample size with that. Now, there will be people that will be going, well, LaVine's out, so Kobe White's going to get a huge bump. I'm not really sure that's true, because we had a really interesting sample of the 2 weeks before LaVine returned from the first injury. White struggled. LaVine came back. White got better. Yeah, like, ideally, he's going to get more shots, but LaVine has come back and just not taken shots. Hasn't really changed anything about White. So, White's still a full go, obviously. I'm not sure this gives him a huge bump because he was already doing that stuff anyway. Kobe had 23, 8, and 4 with 2 steals. Vooch had 24, 13, and 7 with 2 steals and a block. Interesting, 0 crossover with him and Andre Drummond. So you can go, Jack, Andre.
Get that garbage out of here.
Absolutely no reason to be holding on to him. And Dosunmu had 10, 2, and 5. Now, historically, Dosunmu has been a pretty poor fantasy producer. He's a little bit better at the moment. If LaVine is out, I would at least consider him in like the 16s, maybe into 14-team leagues. And Pat Williams becomes a 12-team streamer until we see how they distribute these minutes. He had 12 points with 2 threes in his 23 minutes. Oh, by the way, Alex Caruso, just an absolute guarantee must roster. 10, 3, and 4, 2 threes, 2 steals, 2 blocks, 67%. Hard to go wrong with that. Like, they're pretty bloody good numbers, and he's always seems to do that. And at the moment, somehow, he's not getting hurt. The Toronto Raptors. We got somewhat of an idea of what to expect from this team without Siakam. They might make other moves, and yes, Jakob Poeltl does have to return. But we've got something interesting going on here. Scott Barnes put up huge numbers. Really love, though, put him on the buy low show because he's going to beat that number really easy. 31, 7 and 6, 3 steals, 3 blocks, 2 threes. 61 from the field is amazing. 78 from the line is fantastic. Some horrific turnovers down the end. Did that cost them the game? I don't know. Here's a question without any hate in my heart apart from everyone in Canada. But what do you think about, do you think Barnes has got it in him to be this number one guy? Because he was sort of the number one guy, but he had Siakam there, who was also the number one guy and had the most usage nearly all the time. Barnes has been awesome this season. He's taken big steps forward, but at the moment, as the main guy, do you think that he's got that? I'm not sure. But we're going to get a chance to see. Usage up at 34% here. Emmanuel Quickly, 35 minutes, only 12 points on 10 shots. Would have liked him to get a few more. He had 12, 3 and 3. And wouldn't you know it, Rowan Barrett Jr., did he shoot 60% from the field again? Nah. 17, 4 and 6 on 37% shooting. 4 or 5 from the line, which is pretty good. 17% from 3. Okay. That is fine. That is a fine fantasy line. That is more reasonable for who he is as a player. 17, 4 and 6 with a steal. I talked about Gary Trent in the opener, and I said, look, if he doesn't actually hit those threes at a crazy rate, he's giving you nothing. He had 6 points on 38% with 2 rebounds and 2 assists. No threes, no steals. Trent is a streamer. Trent is a guy like Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway, the guys that you stream in when you're looking for points and threes. You do not need to must roster him. The big steals that he got were a factor because Nick Nurse was there. That's it. And he's just also not that good. Because what we saw towards the end of this game is that a man who arrived in this city, I think lunchtime? Is that when he got there? I don't know. It took a while to process everything. That to give him his ceremonial poutine as he walked through the border crossing. It took a while for Bruce Brown to get in and get ready to go. Didn't know any of the players. Just jumped in and went, all right, I'm ready to cook. And I thought he was really good. 15 and 7 in 25 minutes. You say, he only played 25 minutes. I know. He just arrived that day and didn't know what he was doing. And the first half was rough. And then he cooked the second half. He's way better than Gary Trent. Way better. 15 and 7, a steal, 70% shooting. Now, he won't shoot 70%, Bruce Brown. I don't think he's going to have this gigantic playmaking role, but I do think that he'll take that starting job away from Gary Trent, who, by the way, this team does not value that highly, Gary Trent. Brown, I think, is going to start, and I would add him if he's available. I was also really impressed with Jonte Porter. 10, 4 and 4, 2 threes, 1 steal, 2 blocks. That's a fantastic fantasy line. I don't know when Pirtle's coming back, maybe a week. Could be the week. Porter is untrustworthy to get enough minutes, which is unfortunate. We wish he would. Thad Young played 15 minutes here and Boucher played 18 minutes. Porter's the guy that I want out of that group, but it's probably only in those deeper formats. But he's got an ability, and we talked about this quite a bit, to fill up so many different categories. We just need 26 out of him. So if you believe that you'll get that, I don't think you will, but if you believe that you'll get it from Jonte, that he is a 12-team league guy. But I don't believe you'll get those 26. So I'd add him in 20, 18, 16, probably 14. I'd consider it. That's about it. We'll have a real conversation about Dennis Schroeder, who had 7 points in 26 minutes. That's 26 minutes in each of the last 2 games. The addition of Brown, Barrett, Quickly, they've hurt him quite a bit. Now, it's very possible that Trent moves on or that Brown moves on in another deal and Schroeder jumps back up. But what he did at the start of the season feels unbelievably miragey, and he is a back-end player. And you know the rule. If he is your worst player on your roster, then jack him off and get somebody else in. You do not have to hold him. He has really tumbled down. He's not dreadful, but he's not awesome. And is there any upside for awesome on this team? I don't think so. And that does hurt. I realized that I went to this time to try and create a lineup change section of the show and then forgot to do it at the start. Clown. Let's do it now just to give you a quick overview of what did happen. Marvin Bagley started with Daniel Gafford injured. Kaysen Wallace started with Lou Dort injured. Lucky there wasn't a huge amount of them today. We had 2 other starting lineup changes. Johnny Conchar, who was a DNP last game, started over Zaire Williams. And Timothy John McConnell started with Halliburton out and with Andrew Nembhard out in Indiana. Glad I was able to get that off my chest. Let's talk about the next game. What a game. Between these 2 small market teams, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Utah Jazz in Utah. I think the Jazz are for real. They lost, but I think they're for real. 134 OKC, 129 Utah. There was no Lou Dort in this one, so Kaysen Wallace started, as I just mentioned. He played 32 minutes and had 16, 4 and 1. 1 steal, 1 block, hit 4 threes, shot 86%. He's been awesome. For fantasy, he hasn't been great. He hasn't been putting up big numbers, but he's been a part of the rotation since day one. He plays the 1, he plays the 2, he plays the 3. He does everything they need him to do, and he had a good offensive game here. You know, he was someone I was really high on in the draft, and what I said last season was when they drafted Jalen Williams, that was Lou Dort's replacement, and then they drafted Case and Wallace and went, well, he's actually Lou Dort's replacement, and I don't even know what this means now as we move forward. I'm sure they're both going to replace Lou Dort in some sense, but Wallace was strong. We're not adding him anywhere. Dort was just out sick here, but really, really interesting. Shea had 31, 6, and 6 on 53% and got to the line 17 times. Wow. 88% shooting from the line. But let's talk about the Bronco Jalen Williams. This is an unbelievable run. He's just doing like 37 minutes for Jalen Williams. He is like, this is one of the, I don't know if historic is not necessarily the right word, but this shit that's happening at the moment is one of the best sort of runs that we've seen this season. Because remember, the beginning of the season, Jalen Williams wasn't doing this. Nothing remotely close. Now, I saw these numbers flash up. I knew them. I didn't know them. I knew the vibe of the numbers in my head. But an account which I want you to go or follow on Twitter, it's called Point Made B-Ball. 4 guys who do a bunch of fantasy stuff, mainly Dynasty coverage. Point Made B-Ball. They tweeted this out today. Jalen Williams' first 20 versus his last 17 games. All right, 4.2 rebounds versus 4.1 rebounds. 3.7 assists versus 5.4. That increase in assists is pretty real, I think. 0.9 steals versus 1.2 steals. All right, we've seen that jump up. Remember, he was bad. 0.9 steals is really quite poor for a steals guy. 0.4 blocks versus 0.6, about the same. 1.8 turnovers versus 2.1, about the same. Not that big a difference. But here's what happened. The first 20 games of the season, Jalen Williams shot 50% from the field. He shot 36% from 3. Totally respectable numbers. 88% from the line. Really good numbers. Really solid, efficient numbers. His next 17 games, he shot 61 from the field, 55 from 3, and somehow got worse, shooting 77% from the line. Now, he has been awesome. He is putting up these crazy numbers. He just can't be stopped, basically. But I refuse to believe that anybody, a perimeter shooter, is a 61% field goal guy with 55% on threes. Nobody is. But if nobody wants to give you anything in a sell high, who gives a shit? Just enjoy what's happening because it has been amazing. It's been a ridiculous run from Jalen Williams. Just a huge performance. 27 points in 37 minutes. 3 rebounds. 8 assists. 2 steals. 2 blocks. 79 from the field. Somehow went only 1 of 2 from the line. Went 80% from 3. This shooting is not going to hold, but it also doesn't matter that much. He has turned from a guy at the start of the season who was fine, who was serviceable, who was solid. And the last 2-3 weeks have been, last month, has been like genuine all-star level production. I'd like to see it last longer, and I don't know what's going to happen when the shot falls away, because it is going to fall away. But he's doing all this in just no usage at all. The other interesting thing is, in that time, even with that crazy shooting jump, his scoring went from 17 points a game to 20 points a game. Like that, 3 points up, despite being the best shooter of all time. These numbers are insane. But again, if you can't sell high, if no one wants to give you a top 20 or top 25 player, don't do it. Just enjoy what's happening, understanding that just variance is going to get you to a degree. Josh Giddey, what are we doing now? 20 and 10, 6 assists, 30 minutes. Shot 50% from the field. He was bad. He stepped up and started to improve. And then the last 2-3 games were quite poor. And people will say, well, it's because the report came out that he's not getting any charges, that he's back in business now. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case, but obviously the timing lines up perfectly. Really strong game. That's it. That's encouraging for the rest of season value. We'll see what happens after that. And Chet Holmgren had 15, 5, and 5 with 4 blocks. Chet has definitely cooled since the beginning of the season. He's now outside the top 25 for the year. He is 74th over the last 2 weeks, and he scored off, which was fine because he was shooting like 50% from 3. Because, as we're well aware, when you shoot 50% from 3, you don't keep shooting 50% from 3. So he's cooled off, and he's still really, really good, but he's not this first-round player or second-round player. He's like a third to fourth round sort of a guy, is how I see it. With Dort out, we've got extra minutes there for Aaron Wiggins, who had 4 points in his 23 minutes, and Kenrich Williams, the Oklahoma City Mudflap, had 9, 4, and 2. But for the Jazz, they weren't embarrassed at all. Because not only do we have Jalen Williams in this game as the greatest shooter of all time, we've got the second greatest shooter of all time in this game as well, because Colin Sexton can't be stopped. What is going on? Why is this happening? He played 34. Look, he'd been just cooking at 24 minutes. They just said, we're going to ramp it up. He played 34. He had 31, 1 and 7 with 4 triples. He got to the line 10 times, only hit 7, but shot 53 from the field. This is another run which is going to cool off, but he is almost unstoppable at the moment. And I just could not have expected him to do this. Because he didn't. He didn't do it for the first 30 games of the season. He was nowhere near it. And he is dominating. Clarko, bit rough on the efficiency for Geordie. The man on the street had 18, 2 and 5 on 39%, but he's got big minutes. But Chris Dunn played 13 and Keontae George played 14. Now, George got poked in the eye. He did return. But they just went with a lot of Sexton and Clarkson together. And it worked okay. The other thing we saw in this one is that they just didn't want to use John Collins much down the stretch. Now, you look at Collins' numbers. You go, we had 21 points in 24 minutes. Why did they bench him? Because he was getting cooked defensively. So Kessler played 24 minutes. He had 7 and 10, 1 steal, 3 blocks. Kessler's numbers are all relatively strong. He just doesn't play huge minutes because I think Will Hardy's using him perfectly. He still is a must-roster guy for category leagues. Probably not in points leagues necessarily, but that's okay. And John Collins is a fringy sort of a player. Probably the best game from Fontecchio in the last couple of weeks. We don't need to worry too much there. 12 points in 29 minutes with 2 threes for Simone. And Markkanen had his usual 26 and 10, and Olynyk had 7, 2 and 4. So a lot of the same sort of stuff, except they went away from Dunn and George and played a lot of Sexton and Clarkson together. Didn't get the win, but I think they established themselves as not like a fluke run team, like a team that might actually be good. All right, let's do the next one. The Minnesota Timberwolves handle business against the the Minnesota Timberwolves handle business against the Memphis Grizzlies. All these M's getting me confused. Let's talk about Memphis. They made a change to their starting lineup. Last game, Johnny Conchard didn't play at all. This game, he started over Zaire Williams. I'll just quickly say something on Zaire, who played 12 minutes and had 2 points. I think he stinks. I don't think he's any good. And he's had a few opportunities this season and hasn't really done anything with him. This is year 3. I'd be a little bit worried about where we go from here with him. But what I'm pretty comfortable with is the bug, Vince Williams. 10, 7, and 5, 3 steals, a block, 2 threes. Just got to be rostered everywhere. And I think Xavier Tillman does as well. The cashier had 10, 5, and 6, a steal and a block, played 36 minutes. There's no center that's coming back. Maybe Brandon Clark, but I don't think they rush him back. Tillman's got some good numbers. And the Duck had 18 points, Luke Kennard, in his 31 minutes. He had 5 triples with 2 assists and a steal. Talked about the other day how he'd struggled a little bit, but I just didn't buy that Luke Kennard was like a 20% shooter because he isn't. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA, and he got them cracking here. He didn't do much else, but he's a nice little points and threes guy who's usually very efficient. Santi Aldama played 25 minutes. He had 13 points with 2 threes, a steal and a block. You know that I'm just not as high on Santi as other people are. He didn't shoot very well. He got a lot of shots up. I think he's fine to add as a 14-team league player, but if we're talking standard leagues, I definitely wouldn't rush to do it. And then we talk about GG Jackson. Obviously, there were a lot of hyperbolic reactions to GG, and I did try a little bit to push them down as much as I could, just to be aware that the youngest player in the NBA with almost historically bad levels of efficiency problems in college might have some of those struggles in the NBA. He played 10 minutes. He was 1 point, 0 of 3 from the field, 3 rebounds, no defensive stats, and somehow was a minus 25 in 10 minutes. He just got cooked. Now, he's going to have better games than this, but this was the worry that what he did in that other game, where he played 17 minutes straight to close out the game, shot 70% or whatever it was from the field, and got these defensive stats which he pulled out of his ass, was just not going to be sustainable. But that's what we do. We try and get out ahead of it. There were, again, some people going a little bit hard on it, a little bit crazy on it in terms of how they were valuing GG. I even saw the term league winner thrown away, which is a term that I despise. If you want to jack GG Jackson,
Get that garbage out of here.
Totally reasonable. If you've got someone on your team who's got the ability to do this, well, that's not really a 12-team league guy, is it? He's been added basically everywhere, and having some patience is fine. He's not going to be this bad, but he's also not going to be as good as he was the last time out. And the reality probably sits somewhere, where have I got him projected rest of season? Like 214th. Okay? Like that's sort of where I had him. You take a flyer, you see what sticks, but it didn't stick. So there you go. For the Wolves, speaking of not sticking, Jaden McDaniels had 11 points in 36 minutes. He did have a triple one, but that's just not anything more than a stream guy. While Mike Conley, what's this? 17, 4, and 10 with 2 steals. The big Mike Conley game. He doesn't always do this very clearly, but a strong performance. While the Wizard of Naz Reid, 20 points, 4 threes, 2 steals, a block. 24 minutes. That's a huge game. 62% shooting, filling it up. It does help that you're playing against what you're playing against in the opponent, but some good numbers there. Gobert had 6 blocks in 39 minutes, and Goose had 28, 5 and 5. Not the best Towns game. He had 14 points in 29 minutes. He had 2 threes on 41%, but that's fine. Actually, you know what? I didn't talk about Jaren Jackson. I'll quickly do that. Thank you, Taylor Jenkins, for fouling him out. Jaren ended up with 36 points in 27 minutes. He did have 5 fouls, but again, you fouled him out. You wanted to keep him on the bench because of fouls, just in case he didn't get to play all of his minutes, and he didn't play all of his minutes. 36 points with 3 threes. He just went bananas offensively. He's taking every shot in the world. Last game, what did he shoot? 20%? This one, 65%. If I can get any top 50 player in the trade, I would do it. Not only are we going to have these wild percentage fluctuations, I'm just not confident how long he plays for, or if an injury crops up or whatever. Great offensive explosion. I just do get a little bit worried as we move forward. Not much else, I don't think, to talk about there on the Minnesota side of the ledger. All right, let's do the final game of the day. The Pacers were up huge here over the Kings, a depleted Pacers team with no Halliburton, no Siakam. The Kings came back, made it really close, but in the end, Indiana gets the win, 126-121. And we got some big performances from things that just aren't going to mean anything as we move forward, because the sticks man, the big fella, Jalen Smith, helps when you play against a Kings defense. But he had 17 and 13 in 25 minutes. He had 86% shooting, and now he's going to be the backup center because Siakam's going to play tomorrow. So that's all well and good. Jalen, thank you for whatever lack of service you gave us, and now we can move on. Although, as a backup center and Miles Turner's continued sort of struggles, there's something there. And Isaiah Jackson suffered a Jackson here. He suffered a head injury in this one. I don't think he'll be ready for tomorrow, so Smith will get those minutes. If you wanted to hold because you got him on your roster, do it, but long-term, that's not going to help. Obert Toppin had 10, 3 and 4. His shift is done. And then with no Halliburton, no Neesmith, no Nembhard, the only point guard was Timothy John. And McConnell played 33 minutes. He had 20 points with 10 assists on 64%. Once again, Tim, thank you for your service. Hold for tomorrow until we at least get confirmation that Halliburton is back, but this is not going to last very long. And thank you for giving us one last big one. That's what she said. Bennett Mathurin played 37 minutes. He had 25, 3 and 4, 1 steal, 2 blocks. Probably the most well-rounded line Ben Mathurin's ever had. Again, is he going to play 37 minutes if Neesmith and Nembhard are there? Probably not. And the same with Bud Hield, who had 12, 6 and 8 with a steal, a block, and 2 threes. I think Hield will start, but Mathurin could. If you've got Mathurin and Hield, I would definitely hold them over Smith, or even over McConnell, to be honest, because someone has to replace Bruce Brown. But that is, Halliburton, Neesmith, and Nembhard all have, and Siakam, that is 4 guys who have claims to be a starter on this team, who could all come back and just blow this stuff up. We saw Jarris Walker get a little bit hot, 15 points for him in 20 minutes, but his path to minutes is just not there. They should just replace Obi Toppin out of that rotation completely and let Jarris get the backup minutes, but it was good to see him having a couple of really interesting games the last 2. And Miles Turner, 18 and 2 is stinky. Not much else going on there, but at least he got some minutes. For the Kings, Kevin Huerter, fan of pants, 39 minutes for him, 31 points, 7 triples. 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, a block, 65% shooting. What an amazing performance, Kevin Huerter.
Get that garbage out of here!
We talked about how the Kings had a bad schedule on the surface, but a good one when you looked into it. And the value of Kevin Huerter, I said, stream in for those 2 games, and it worked out bloody perfectly. But now, he does not play Friday, he does not play Saturday, he does not play Sunday. I don't think Kevin Huerter, who is notoriously fickle in terms of his production, minutes, shooting numbers, is worth holding through 3-0s. I would be absolutely on board with dropping him. Now, if you've been absolutely bamboozled and not the right term is to say, but if you've been you're mesmerized by the fan of pants experience, hold him. But you're getting 3-0s. And this is also hot streak stuff for him. It just doesn't hold long term. Murray had 27 and 9 with 2 steals and a block. Love to see that he's starting to put together more consistency and more higher usage games, while Sabonis had just another casual triple-double with bad free throws, 21, 11, and 10 with no steals and no threes. De'Aaron Fox's free throws are becoming a real problem, so are his field goal. His field goal numbers are so well down this season, especially his 2s. We talked a lot about that. He's at 51, I think, from 2, really shit numbers. He had 24, 5, and 6 on 40% shooting and went 5 of 9 from the line. That is really hurting him. He is now down to 44th for the season, while Malik Monk struggled too. Shocking from the field, 33%, but why is Leaky Monk going 1 of 6 from the line? That's not something that he does. He also chipped in 2 blocks out of nowhere. He had 9, 3, and 4. Leaky did. I still think we hold on to him. We don't hold on to the pencil. We don't worry about Trey Lyles. But honestly, much like with Huerter, if you did want to move on from Monk because there are 3-0s the rest of this week, I think it's okay. I would recommend holding Monk, but I do get it. He's in a slump at the moment. He didn't shoot well, and maybe you just desperately need to get things in to happen for the rest of the week, and he's your worst player. And if he is, well, I think we know what we do. We call in John Armstrong, and he does a little bit of business for us. They're the games. From Thursday, just quickly on the paces, Siakam will play tomorrow. No word on whether Halliburton will, but he might. And then all that stuff just blows up completely in terms of how the rotation looked and how all the production was in today's action. Let's look at the stream of the day recap. Some successes, some L's. The 10-team stream was Vince Williams. He had 10, 7, and 5, 3 steals and a block. Huge W. The 12-team stream is Alex Caruso. 10, 3, 4, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Another W. The 14-team stream was Isaiah Jackson. Played 5 minutes. Head injury. Done. 2 points. What an absolutely gigantic L that is. The 16-team league was Jonte Porter. Massive W. 10, 4, and 4, 1 steal and 2 blocks. And look at Vince Williams' line, look at Jonte's line, and look at Alex Caruso's line. They almost look exactly the same. Xavier Tillman was your points league stream for both Yahoo and ESPN. He had 29 on Yahoo. He had 30 on ESPN. I think that is pretty good as well. So I think overall, outside of the Isaiah Jackson disaster class, it all worked out okay. What about the Monstrous line of the night? Who gets it? Quite a few contenders, I would say. But in the end, we have to give props to all of our favourite team and our favourite player. And of course, we go to Scotland Barnes, who had 31 points with 3 steals and 3 blocks and filled it up right across the board, including game-losing turnovers. So congratulations to Scott Barnes. The waiver wire line of the night. I'm going to do some adjustments, I think, to some of my percentage cutoffs for categories now because we're at a stage where there are more dead leagues appearing and I'm trying to work it out. And looking at it, I can see about, on Yahoo, probably 30% dead at the moment. So some of these categories that I've got here, I have sort of considered that part of it because there's, like, Ja Morant is rostered in 47% of Yahoo leagues. The man is not playing again this season, and 47% of leagues are not Dynasty. They're about 5%, I would guess. There are some leagues that aren't dead, but they've got dead teams in them. Those guys are probably holding on to Ja. But so that's why I'm going to look here. If he's at 47 when he's clearly not playing, and people wouldn't be like, you know, maybe I'll have hope of Ja coming back. They know what's going on. And then there's some of the cut off between those two, whether it's a dead league or a dead team. I think 30 is a fair number for dead leagues at the moment. Would be my guess. The waiver wire line of the night. Enough stalling it is. Fana Pants, he had 31 points with 7 threes. He was amazing. But I just don't know that the ups and downs you get from him are worth holding on. It might be, but I'm not super convinced. I've seen Kevin Huerter play for years and years and years. The young gun of the night. Who is it? It is someone who plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it's not Chet Holmgren. Of course, it's the Bronco. Jalen Williams, 27 points, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks. He had 2 steals. He shot 1,000,000%, as he seems to do every day. And the dud of the night. Usually, I like to see people who are rostered in 70% of leagues here, so it's not unfair, but I am going to... This sort of brought my mind in to have a look at how we change some of these percentage cutoffs, because I looked at that Ja Morant thing, and I saw that, like, according to Basketball Monster's advanced metric, he was at about 94%. He was 40% rostered on Yahoo, and if I've got 30% inactives, that pushes him to about equivalent to being a 70% player, but it's got to be Greg Jackson. 1 point, 3 rebounds, 0 assists for GG. Absolute stinker, absolute turd. Grabbed in most competitive leagues, and I think he was going to be dropped in a lot of those competitive leagues starting out tomorrow. That'll bring us now to have a look at the top 6 players for the day. We'll start with the top 6 players in category leagues. Of course, we will. Let's have a look. Who is the top? Well, we know who the top is. The top is Scott Barnes, but it was really tight up the top. It went Barnes, followed by a couple of Jalen's. Quite a few of those in the league. Jalen Brunson, Jalen Williams, Fana Pants Kevin Huerter, Nikola Vucevic, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Your top players, Ross in under 50% of leagues. Probably going to make an adjustment here again, as I said. Kevin Huerter, Jalen Smith, Kaysen Wallace, the Duck Luke Kennard, Jonte Porter, and Marvin Bagley, who would have been way higher had he not missed all of his free throws. I think, Smith's going to be dead now. Wallace, nothing. Kennard, probably a 12-teamer. Porter, a streamy sort of option, and Bagley, a stream guy as well, until we get news that Gaff is back and we see how Wes Unseld handles it. Your top 6 players in points leagues, number 1 was Jalen Brunson, followed by Scotland Barnes, Nick Vucevic, Jalen Williams, Rudy Gobert, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So let's have a look at just a quick little summary of some things that I think are important to take away. I think Jonte can be added for your deeper leagues into stream in. I would look to see whether Bruce Brown is available. I think he's a strong add. And Marvin Bagley has a little bit of value as a stream guy. Yes, Tillman and Vince Williams are on that list as well. In terms of drops, I've got Kevin Huerter there. Don't be afraid to do it if you want to open up some spots. And the other one is Jaden McDaniels, who just isn't good enough to be held in all 12-team leagues. He's fine, but you can get a lot more value, I think, out of streaming through his roster spot majority of the time. There's just not enough consistency of good performances from Jaden McDaniels. And that, guys, will bring us through to the end of today's show. Don't forget, be a double banger. But what's almost more important than be a double banger today is going across and finding the live trade deadline show. It's pinned at the top of the YouTube channel and giving it a pre-like, giving it a pre-thumb. Get that thumb worked out for when the trade deadline actually happens in 3 weeks' time. Leave a comment there as well. You can put it in the chat. You can put it under the video. Chuck it on a bookmark as well. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. See ya.